Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wildly Thriving podcast. Today's guest is Jake Cokerhands. He is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner who focuses on helping clients struggling with chronic gut issues like SIBO and acid reflux. He has over 10 years of experience as a nutritionist and health coach, and he and his wife currently run a business called Atlas Functional Wellness, where they work to address the deep underlying root causes and imbalances that contribute to complex chronic digestive issues. Welcome, Jake, to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Miranda. Excited to talk.
Me too. I'm super interested in your story and what brought you to becoming an FDN in the first place. So, if you don't mind
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah. I started out initially as a health coach, primarily worked with, weight loss clients, helping with nutrition. I did that for probably 10 years or so before I actually got into the functional health space. And funny enough, it actually wasn't until I met my, back then girlfriend, now wife, we got a little bit more serious and decided that we wanted to have an adventure, move to a different state that we'd never lived in. So right now we're in Salt Lake City, Utah. We wanted to move down to Austin, Texas, for like a year or so and just explore a new city and meet new people. And that's kind of where a lot of our health journey actually started. So little did we know, we ended up moving into a home that had toxic mold, which for those of you who are familiar with that, mold illness can be pretty serious. And I watched my wife within a very short period of time go from somebody who was just so naturally bubbly and silly and full of energy. We'd go to the gym every single morning, like very healthy and active, to probably within a month or two of us being down there, just battling with crippling fatigue, brain fog, like just could not even focus on anything throughout the day. Eventually that manifested into pretty severe anxiety to the point where it was at its worst. She was having daily panic attacks. I mean, she'd wake up and within 10 minutes on a Saturday, nothing going on, and just be like hyperventilating. And then it ultimately led to just a ton of food sensitivities and gut issues for both her and myself. She really got hit the worst when it came to the neurological symptoms, but we both started developing our own gut issues and eventually got to a point where it was serious enough, kind of the typical story. We went to traditional doctors, ran lab tests, they couldn't figure out what was going on. And fortunately for me, I at the time had one of my clients who was an FDN. And as we were kind of talking about what was happening, she was the one who first put me on to the idea that, hey, maybe there's something in your environment like mold that could be contributing to this, especially if you guys are both dealing with it. And so, I'm somebody who loves just learning about health. I've always had a big passion for it. So I decided that I would just kind of go down that path and actually become certified through functional diagnostic nutrition to better understand how to read and interpret these different functional labs, how to put together protocols, and ultimately how to address the various causes and imbalances that lead somebody to developing these chronic symptoms that so many people are dealing with. And so it really started out as a way to just figure out how to get my wife's health back and also how to address the gut issues that we were dealing with. But then it ultimately turned into me kind of pivoting my entire business away from just doing like fitness and weight loss stuff to where I now help a lot of clients who are dealing with chronic digestive issues. So whether that's bloating, acid reflux, constipation, diarrhea, and that's kind of what we do now.
Yeah, I love the FDN methodology. That's what I am as well. And it really is something that opens your eyes to a different perspective because the way that Reed teaches you is it gets you on this understanding that our body is a system and it's never just one input. There's multiple inputs, multiple things that can be causing these imbalances. And I know you were talking a lot about on your page with SIBO and acid reflux, and a lot of people are kind of throwing mud at the wall, hoping something sticks, with these different types of medication or these different methods of, trying to either lower the stomach acid or raise it. But you have to fully understand that there could be something going on underneath the surface that is actually creating that environment, and it might not just be one thing. So like for instance, like
Right.
maybe the starting point for your acid reflux was actually anxiety, and then that anxiety set the stage for an infection. Would you care
Hmm.
to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the things that one of my biggest peeves in the health space is a lot of people want to just pin the sole cause of like reflux or SIBO on just one thing. And you'll hear that a lot with reflux is it's either too much stomach acid or it's too little. You're not producing enough stomach acid. So the answer is to either take a PPI or butane HCl, which is kind of crazy because they're the exact opposite thing. So like who's right? Well, the reality is that for some people, maybe it is because you're not producing enough stomach acid. But I would say that that's, I mean, maybe a quarter of the people that I personally work with. And then there's this whole other subset of individuals who that same advice that you hear touted by so many people because it's simple. It's like, oh, here's just this one thing and it's going to fix everything. Well, a lot of people will do that and they end up feeling way worse and it causes more burning and more irritation. So obviously, that's not the whole picture. And what I've found is that there's often, I mean, a number of different potential root causes, and some people might have a combination of these things. And this is kind of why the way that I've structured my entire process when I work with clients is we break it up into a three-phase approach. It's normally done over 3 to 4 months. And in each one of those phases, we're addressing all the various possible imbalances or root causes that led somebody to develop those issues. Because as much as we would like to have just like, oh, here, take this test and it's going to tell you, do you have low stomach acid or do you have, I mean, is your gut motility functioning well? Or, all this stuff. Like there's testing out there, but there's a lot that's not perfect. And so at the same time, we have to have an order of operations that we work through and maybe even just run some experiments to figure out what's going on. So for my experience, especially with acid reflux, I find that number one, we have to come in with things that are going to help to first soothe any irritation or inflammation in the esophagus and stomach, because a lot of times people aren't even able to tolerate some of the other supplements that they need to fix the problem. But then we need to, okay, bring in things that are going to heal up the lining of your stomach and esophagus. We need to incorporate things that are going to support optimal gut motility and stomach emptying. We need to incorporate things that are going to strengthen that valve that sits at the top of the stomach called your lower esophageal sphincter, which is basically designed to kind of open up when food enters the stomach, but then close tightly shut so things don't wash back up into your esophagus. So those are kind of the initial foundational things that we address. But then there's also this other category of people who, in addition to dealing with reflux, they're also experiencing a lot of other digestive symptoms. So they might get chronic bloating after everything they eat, or they have loose stool, or a lot of excessive gas, things that would indicate that they probably have some sort of gut imbalance or some sort of overgrowth like SIBO or candida. And I find that for a lot of those people, you could take a PPI for 20 years and you could even do all the stuff that I talked about in that first phase, but it's not until we actually come in and a lot of times incorporate some different herbal antimicrobials to clear out those infections that your symptoms really start to improve. Because if you're eating certain foods that are feeding those overgrowths, causing all this fermentation and gas production in your gut, well, that's going to build up all this pressure that can ultimately drive the contents of your stomach into your esophagus and throat. And those overgrowths also contribute to things like histamine intolerance and sinus colonization and all these other things that a lot of times, when you go to your ENT or your GI doc, they're not really going to talk about. But I find there's a good percentage of people who, until those things are addressed, they're just spinning their wheels. That's why so many people are stuck.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tricky thing, and it's like it's not easily addressed through the conventional system. Like people think like they have this thought in their head that if I'm having a gut issue, need to go to a gastroenterologist, and that's not truly like the answer, the person that you want to go to, even though you think logically, okay, well, this person specializes in this area, they've gone to school in this area, they should know that. But truly, like the system has failed a lot of people for the reason being like they completely overlook bacterial, viral, fungal infections, and that's like the main driver. So they're going to go in there and like I literally have a client right now. He said he got a colonoscopy. They came back and didn't find anything, like no polyps, no nothing. So they kind of like sent him on his way. And I found 12 different infections. And he was like completely wiped out on his beneficial bacteria, like no Akkermansia, no Firmicutes, no Bacteroidetes, like nothing. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is why you are literally like crapping your brains out 8 times a day. Like you have so
Yep.
much endotoxin release and your entire stomach is just bacterial excrement, essentially. I was like, you're absorbing nothing. His testosterone was a 1 on his Dutch test. It was crazy.
Wow.
Like it's super like massive suppression from these bacterial infections. And do you notice that as well with your clients? Like, I guess I have my question first is like when you have somebody that's having these symptoms like acid reflux and gut issues, what are like the first tests that you reach for? And then I'll ask my follow-up question.
So I'll tell you that my approach with a lot of my clients is a little bit different than maybe what other people do. So I will sometimes, I mean, a stool test, if I'm going to run anything, would usually be the first one, just so we can, like what you had said, see, okay, what are we working with? What sort of pathogens are present? How well are you breaking down and digesting food? Is your immune system compromised? Various things like that. But I've kind of made a name for specifically focusing on SIBO. And I know a lot of people out there really push towards going to your doctor and getting a SIBO breath test. But honestly, I just don't see a lot of value in that for a number of reasons. The first one is there was a study, I can't remember exactly when it was published, looking at two groups of people who go out and get the SIBO breath test. One group actually had a lot of the typical symptoms of SIBO, but the other group was completely asymptomatic. They had no GI symptoms whatsoever. And the positivity rate of both groups of people who tested positive for SIBO was almost the exact same. And so I have a lot of concern over the rate of false positives. And at the same time, okay, let's say that you are positive. Well, it doesn't give us any additional insight into what factors ultimately contributed to the SIBO developing in the first place. And so I also have my own kind of checklist of assessing the likelihood that somebody might have one of those overgrowths. I always like to start off with maybe a 2 to 4 week trial of the low FODMAP diet because this is one that was specifically designed for people with IBS and SIBO. It usually, if somebody has some sort of bacterial overgrowth, they're going to notice a difference. They're going to notice improvements in their symptoms pretty quickly. And obviously, when you can do it the opposite test, which is okay, try some onion or garlic and asparagus. And if those are the foods that specifically flare you, well, to me, that's a huge red flag that there's some sort of overgrowth. Another thing that I look at, and this has just been what I've seen clinically, is the timing that it takes for somebody to get bloated after a meal. Because to me, when somebody eats something and they bloat, like even before they're done eating, like within 5 to 10 minutes, that's going to tell me something a little bit different than if that bloating's delayed and maybe comes on an hour to 3 hours afterwards. Because if you think about the time that it even takes for food to travel through the guts, I mean, there's not going to be a lot of fermentation due to SIBO within 15 minutes. That's mainly going to be like low stomach acid, poor motility. Maybe your gut lining's inflamed. Maybe it's an immune reaction that you're having to the food. But normally with something like SIBO, it's going to be like an hour at least, usually an hour to 2 hours. And then that bloating and gas really starts to come on. And so I'm looking at the timing, what foods are triggering your symptoms, how long it takes for you to get bloated, along with maybe what we see on a stool test, because that's not necessarily diagnostic of SIBO either. But I find that I mean, if you're getting bloating and gas after meals, there's a very, very high likelihood that there's probably some sort of overgrowth there. So it's kind of a collection of clues that I'm looking at from our initial intake and conversation that helps me to determine if I think we need to, to go through an antimicrobial phase at some point.
Yeah, I do that same exact thing too. I like to test with specific foods. Like I'll have them eat like an extremely high FODMAP meal and see how they feel after that. And then I'll have them like, experiment with a low FODMAP diet for a few days and see if they have a reduced amount of symptoms. And it's like the perfect test for
Yep.
me because number one, it's like no cost to them. And
Right.
it's actually telling us, okay, well, what are your food triggers? Like what do we have to eliminate from your diet for a period of time before or so that we can trigger healing for this scenario. That was my
Hmm.
follow-up question was the SIBO. So that's cool that you don't do the SIBO testing either, because I agree with you. I don't see much value in it. And
And they're
like you said, it's
expensive. They're like
yeah, they
300,
are.
four
They are.
hundred bucks for to get like a yes or a no. And it's like,
Yeah.
cool, yes, you have it, or maybe you have it because the false positives, and then beyond that, there's no other information you're getting, at least with a stool test, which is the exact same amount of money. I mean, you're getting a ton of information of what's going on in that environment. So I think that's, if you're going to spend money on anything, that you're going to get much better bang for your buck with the stool test.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I know I've modified my foundational lab since I've been through FDN. It's just what I prefer, what I've found that helps my clients the best and saves them the most money. Is there anything that you have changed over the years that you've noticed that you don't find as valuable anymore as maybe you did at the very beginning?
Oh yeah. Food
Mhm.
sensitivity tests.
I was gonna ask. I was like, I know he's gonna say food sensitivity. It's expensive and it's like it creates food fear. I want you to elaborate on that. Like
Yeah.
what made you change from using those to stopping? Like what made you bridge that gap or was it right away?
Well, it was pretty soon after. I mean, it only took a little bit of digging to realize that a food sensitivity is very different from a food allergy, which oftentimes a food allergy where you go into full-blown anaphylaxis, I mean, that could be something that's lifelong that somebody's dealing with, whereas a sensitivity can be due to so many different variables. And I find that oftentimes it's not even the food itself that's triggering the reaction, it's more so the environment that the food's going into that's causing the problem. Because if you have damage to your gut lining and your microbiome's imbalanced, you're not producing enough short chain fatty acids, like you could be eating otherwise healthy foods, and then eventually your body develops these intolerances to it because your immune system's on high alert and it's seeping through the gut lining. Your body's developing antibodies against, those particular foods. So what I was finding is we'd run these super expensive tests and there'd be all these foods in the red, which, like what you had mentioned, creates a ton of anxiety and fear around what they can eat. So you might even have somebody, and I had this conversation a few times where they're like, well, that's crazy because I see these foods in the red, and these are like some of the few foods that I'm able to eat without getting any bloating or symptoms. And then I see these foods in the green, and that's kind of weird because these are the foods that really like mess me up the most. And so there wasn't a lot of congruency between what we were seeing on the test and what the client was saying. And then what I'd find is that we would go through a whole gut healing protocol, and a few months later, we'd heal up the gut lining, get rid of infections, kind of support the microbiome and build that back up. And you do that same test, and what was originally like 40 foods in the red is now five. And so, food sensitivities are dynamic, and it's a lot to do with what the environment in your gut looks like in that moment. And so I don't want people to ever get to a place where they start labeling foods as bad and like, oh, I can't have this food just because a test told them so. I think a much better gauge is to be able to listen to your own body and maybe keep a food journal because those things can change. And I try to preach that with the low FODMAP diet too, because a lot of people get stuck in that trap of thinking high FODMAP foods are bad. The first conversation I have is that, hey, listen, understand under normal circumstances, these high FODMAP foods are some of the healthiest and most beneficial foods for your gut. It's just that right now, it's kind of like, you have an injured muscle that you're trying to keep working out while this muscle's injured. We just need to take a step back, go through a rehab program, give it some time to heal. And then the idea is that you return to being able to tolerate all these things with no issues. And so yeah, I don't like things that kind of cause people to put labels on food, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. And like, it's such a perfect example because now I had SIBO very severely. I had severe IBS-D, and I would drink a green juice every morning, lots of garlic and onions, because I thought that was what was going to fix my gut, because you're told all these things like these are the
Yep.
healthiest foods. So I'd like eat it over and over again and like glued to the toilet. You know what I mean? And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like I just could not figure it out. And then I finally went to FDN school trying to heal myself. And I was like, oh, infections. That's something I've
Yeah.
never considered before. So I was like, okay, SIBO. I was like, all right, I'm probably feeding this infection. And that's why I'm bloated all the time. And that's why I feel so foggy and tired. And it just made a lot of sense. And it finally clicked. And I did follow a low FODMAP diet, but it really wasn't until I started changing other things in my life other than like just the diet itself. It was like habitual. It was being in a bad relationship and constantly being triggered with stress, feeling anxious all the time, being misaligned with just like what I was doing because I was in that, bad
Right.
relationship. So with that being said, I guess I'm saying that because it's typically more than one thing. Like you could be eating healthy foods, you could be supplementing, you could be doing all the things right, but if you're missing one key element, like the foundation of it all, then
Yeah.
you're going to keep spinning your wheels and it's going to be challenging in order for you to actually heal. And that's why I recommend reaching out and finding somebody that knows how to treat your body as a system and that knows how to do the diagnostics, not just running tests, but asking the right questions. So, just like you were saying with the SIBO, it's important that we just ask, okay, well, what are you reacting to? Like, what symptoms are you actually having? And then we can, like, kind of scale that out. Oh, it's probably a 90% likelihood that you have this. Like, we need that anecdotal evidence, the personal experience of the client, their whole health history, their trauma
Hmm.
history, so that we can get a good understanding of why they are having this current experience right now. So it's a complex thing that it needs to be addressed in a specific way. I like that you said that you do a three-phase process because I do the same exact thing. So it's like we focus on removal and repair, so soothing, lowering inflammation, and then removing the inputs, right? Because a lot of people are spraying on their toxic perfumes and that's
Oh yeah.
causing their hormones. Yeah, yeah. Is that a big thing that you help people work through?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, just most of us are, uh, I mean, just throughout our day-to-day lives, I mean, we're being exposed to so many different chemicals that are already disrupting our microbiome. And that's what I find so interesting when, people want to go the conventional route of getting rid of SIBO and think that, oh, I just need to go to my doctor, take a 2-week round of antibiotics like rifaximin, just kill everything off, and then I'm going to be good to go. But at the same time, there's a huge percentage of my clients who come to me specifically saying, yeah, all of my gut issues happened after I took antibiotics because again, it's not always just about killing things off and trying to, just take an antibiotic to solve the problem. If you're not repopulating your beneficial bacteria and restoring balance to that ecosystem, then the problem's inevitably going to come back. And I think statistically, there's what, like a 66% relapse rate when it comes to SIBO. And it's because there's no talk about how to fix that environment or ecosystem after you come in and basically drop an atomic bomb in your gut and wipe everything out. And so going back to
Mhm.
all the environmental toxins that people are exposed to, the glyphosate on food and just the phthalates and things, artificial fragrances, all of that stuff, even though it's, little exposures every day, it ultimately contributes to that disruption in that ecosystem. And so, Yeah, I mean, that's a huge piece of what we focus on initially as we kind of prep the body for antimicrobials, is we got to reduce the inputs and then help to start clearing things out that your body's been accumulating over however many years.
Exactly. And there's something to be said about that as well. I think so many people are just thrown an antibiotic for a UTI or things like that. Like Cipro being prescribed so easily and just like right off the jump at every little tiny thing is mind blowing to me.
Crazy. Yeah.
Especially with like a lot of these antibiotics have black box warnings on them. Like it could literally like de I don't want to say granulate, but like it can ruin like your Achilles heel. Like you could just be
Mm,
walking around one day and it snap. You know what I mean? It's called being floxed. And
yeah.
also these antibiotics, they don't remove biofilms. And that's honestly one of the biggest issues because the reason why we tend to have these bacterial overgrowths and these issues with infections is because they create these cellular matrices called biofilms where they can cloak and hide themselves from the immune system. So you can take an antibiotic all you want, but if it's not reaching those bacteria behind that biofilm, like they're still going to be able to communicate between from bacteria to bacteria, and they're going to be able to evade that. And that's why we see these people that take rounds and rounds and rounds of antibiotics. They're becoming more and more anxious, more and more depressed because they're completely eradicating their beneficial bacteria that you need to produce happy hormones like serotonin. So it's just a big, thing that we're missing in the conventional medicine space. That's very yucky to think about because it's like, how have we gone this long and we're still not incorporating that knowledge into the system? Like how do FDNs exist? You know what I mean? And like how is this
Yeah.
not being taught to doctors? It's just a little frustrating to be honest. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
infections
think one of
are
the problems is too, in addition to that, another big issue is just like the time component. I think a lot of,
Mhm.
conventional doctors, even if they do have the desire to help clients at a deeper level and address some of those additional factors, I mean, they don't have an hour to sit down and do a full health history of, okay, what does your diet look like, and help to put together a meal plan. And so it's really just kind of reaching for what's the low-hanging fruit? Okay, we could take this medication, but as far as talking about any other lifestyle or diet modifications, I mean, you're kind of on your own. I think that's like, the problem with the system in general is there's not enough personalized care. And so, I mean, I don't know what the solution is to that to fix that because they're working with I don't even know how many patients they'll run through in a day, like 30, 40, 50 maybe. And so unless there's
yeah.
maybe other nutritionists who are kind of attached to that. As soon as you talk to your doctor, you go and meet with a nutritionist, then I think you're going to continue to have that same issue.
That's my solution, and that's kind of like the future that I see in the conventional space. If we can ever break free from the powers that be that are, making it, there's so much red tape surrounding any reform
Right.
in that area. But I see it as a way, like if you come to, the hospital, right, and you've got a health issue, like you should be ran through a screening process, and it should determine whether or not you're a candidate for somebody that should even be seen by a doctor. Like, is this a life or death situation? Or is this something that is caused by lifestyle? And then you go and see a nutritionist and actually get a
Mm,
30 to 1 hour conversation with them. You know what I mean? Like that's honestly what is necessary. If we truly want to actually help people in this space and heal people truthfully, that's what needs to get done. But it may just take it just takes a lot of time and a lot of advocating in order for us to actually get to that part because right now we're still just barely proving how much nutrition has an impact on our health. People are barely becoming aware that water can be impacting their health in an extremely negative way. So there's a lot that needs to be
yeah.
undone and unlearned and implemented in our system. But
Yeah.
I
And it's
do have
interesting.
hope.
I also, oh, sorry. Yeah, I was gonna
No, you're
say,
fine.
it's interesting. You also see this with the education system as well, where people more and more are looking for independent education to build a business or for anything. It's like you have all these business coaches and separate certifications that are different from college. And, obviously that's kind of why the functional medicine space has really blown up over the past decade or so versus people just always wanting to go the conventional route to solve these issues. They're realizing that there's a lot of gaps in terms of what's being taught and what's needed to actually get the results that they want. So we'll
Mhm.
see. I think there'll either be a reform, like you said, or I don't know. Everybody's just going to have to become their own self-advocate, and
Mhm.
hopefully, maybe within the educational system, if they
Mhm.
start teaching more of this stuff when people are going through school, then they don't have to pay for a practitioner when they're older because they're already addressing this stuff throughout their younger years. So who knows what'll come first, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I do think it's inevitable though, because at this point, people's personal experiences. I mean, I think they did a survey. I don't know what the number is, but the majority of people do not trust their doctor anymore. And it's because of the care that they're met with. You know what I mean? Like you go in as a woman and you're having a health issue, well, you get labeled like you just have anxiety. Here, take this pill. And then you just continue to get worse and worse, and you don't feel seen. You feel like you're gaslit. Women that are having babies in hospitals are getting pressured into receiving treatments that they don't want, that they didn't ask for. They're rushing them to get like C-section. Like the
Wow.
hospital situation for pregnancy is a nightmare, and it's intentional.
Hmm.
And them, uh, you know, labeling people as brain dead when they're not, just to get their organs, is crazy. There's just so much
Yeah.
sinister things that are going in the conventional space, and people are becoming more and more aware of it. So I do think that reform is inevitable. It just may take some time for everybody to catch up and for us to be able to actually, like, I don't know, I guess afford to do that, because so many things are going to have to change
Right.
with like the insurance system and all of that. So it's a big problem that we're facing, but I do think that FDNs, health coaches, functional medicine practitioners, I think that we're going to see a big shift towards coaches like you and I, because we're actually delivering results to people, and it's
Hmm.
and it's a passion of ours. Like we've been there, and like we get it. Like I don't want to let go of a client until they get the result that they want. A doctor could give a fuck less. You know what I mean? Like
Right. So
they just
true.
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Well, I'm
it's
hopeful.
a
Yeah,
yeah. Me
we'll
too.
have to see what happens.
Me
But
too. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hopping on this call with me. I really appreciate your time, and I loved hearing your story. Where can the listeners find you to be able to work with you?
yeah, so I'd say right now I'm most active on TikTok and Instagram. It's just at Jake Cokerhands, so my first and last name. If they're interested in working with me, they can just find it. The link in my bio. It's acid reflux rescue.info, and that should take you to my page where you can see everything about my program. Get in and work with me. I guide you through that multi-step process. You can get on multiple calls with me every single week to get your questions answered, messaging support in between. So, yeah, if you guys are looking for some help, feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. I will link all of his social media and all of those links below in the caption, so you guys can find him easily to book with him. Highly recommend. He's doing such great work in this space, and you're highly educated on these specific things. I love the niche that you're involved in. Wish I would
Thank
have
you.
known you when I was going through my struggles before, for sure. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you on the next show. Bye.
Thanks, Miranda. See ya.
See ya. Thank you so much. I was trying to make sure that I got done in time so I could let you
Of
go
course. I know.
if you
I'm
have a
sorry that
call.
we were probably a little bit short on time. I hope you didn't feel
No, it's
too rushed,
okay.
but yeah,
No, it's
appreciate you having
okay. I
me
think we had,
on.
of course, I appreciate you. I genuinely wish you the best in your business. Love what you're doing, love all your
Likewise.
content. And yeah, like if I will have my assistant send the full export once it's downloaded, and you can use it however you want. You could put it into shorts. If you want to post it to YouTube, I don't know if you have YouTube. You can do that as well. Up to
Not
you.
yet. Cool.
Not
Yeah,
yet.
no, sounds good. Any
It's a
clips
lot.
or even marketing material or whatever, if you have anything that you want me to like share on my stories, I'm more than happy to. So
Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right. Any questions?
cool.
Just email me at that Miranda Moon coaching email. Okay.
Okay, sounds good,
All right.
Miranda. All right, well, good to meet you. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Good to meet you. Talk to you
All
later.
right,
Bye.
bye.